All right, Proverbs 21, page 686. Do you have prayer requests? All right, remember Ronnie's aunt. All right, okay. Just 1 inch. All right. Sonny's got us stuck on 4 here. Others. What's that? That's right. Yeah. Others. Jade. Okay. Others. Pray for Debbie. Others. Okay. Heather Powers. Pray for Hunter Hanley. And Rick. Proverbs 21. Of course, pray for Sister Nita. The Pitts. Gary Greer. Cindy. All right. Yeah, always. Brother Stan, Forrest, and Allen. Wanda Thurman. Dwight Penland. All right. Unspoken needs. Let's pray. Father, you know our hearts and our burdens. You know our desire to serve and to help. For all these that have been mentioned, we ask that you will touch their bodies, their situations, that you will surround them with people of wisdom and strength to encourage them. Use us every way you see fit. Pray that you will work in their lives to draw them to you and to show them your power and your love, and ours as well. Pray for our church. We're thankful for each one that's gathered and those gathered online. We ask that you will use the time we have today to strengthen us, to build us, to direct us directly into those things that you have prepared for us, for our nation, for our military, for our veterans. Pray that you will make us useful to your purpose. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. 4 inches of rain after church. Proverbs chapter 21 through 23, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. There's no doubt that we've all, in our experience, he already started doing it before I said that, I guess. Um, and we wonder about those people in authority, particularly that executive authority, whether it be king or president or prime minister or whatever. And we see wicked men in those positions sometimes. And we wonder how can this be the will of God? But God used Cyrus, Nebuchadnezzar, and people like that. Uh, all of those kings and directors through the centuries, through history, God has had the ability to move them in one direction or another. Pharaoh, Moses came to him, and the Bible says, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And we have to comprehend that, and it comes down to one thing, and that's that we got to trust God. We've got to trust God. And that's why the whining is so unnecessary on either side, both sides, all sides. The whining really indicates that we don't trust that God's got it under control. And so we've just got to trust God no matter the situation. And obviously, in some of those scenarios through the years, we've thought, boy, this has got to be the end. We got to be Hitler. How can we say that God had Hitler's heart in his hand? But that's what he says here. We've got to trust God, that it's in his control and that he can turn things one way or the other. Verse 2, every way of a man is right in his own eyes. Is that right? It's true, isn't it? Even if we know that it's wrong, we justify it. We justify, well, I know the Bible says that's wrong, but it's right in this situation. Isn't that what we do? Yeah, and then after we did it, we go, well, I guess the Bible was right. And we should just guess the Bible was right ahead of time. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord ponders the hearts. To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Justice and judgment, honesty, fairness, more acceptable than sacrifice. So there's another way we could put that. What do you get out of that verse, verse 3? There's a saying that we have, and I'm sure that you've heard it if you've not said it. Forgiveness is easier than permission. Is that the way they say it? What's that? For permission, asking forgiveness is easier than asking for permission. Because we know we're not going to get permission. And so we figure, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just get forgiveness. And the idea here in verse 3, if you look at it, the sacrifice would be on the forgiveness side. Okay, well, I'm sorry. But what he's saying is just do it right, and then you don't have to say you're sorry. Do the right thing, and then you don't have to apologize. Justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Verse 4, a high look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked is sin. I see every once in a while I hear somebody say, you show me who you are by how you treat the janitor, not how you treat the manager. But that tells me who you are, that you don't see equality already by you saying that I treat one or might treat one differently. So it's not a good philosophy, because that tells me that the person saying that considers the janitor a lower position. People are people. Everybody, the ground is equal at the cross, and God has no respect of persons. So that high look and proud heart, you just bury that because you don't need it. Verse 9. This is probably one of the most famous verses ever quoted. It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Have y'all ever quoted that or heard somebody else quote that? Do yourself a favor, don't hang that up anywhere at the house. Verse 11, and I know what we could say, right? I mean, this was written by a man, but we could say the same thing about a man, couldn't we? Better live in the corner of a housetop than in the house with a brawling man. When the scorner is punished, verse 11, the simple is made wise. Simplify that for me. It's something I have to tell the children over and over and over again. There are consequences. And if I don't teach consequences, and they think they can get away with anything and everything, then when they go outside the house and they can't get away with anything and everything, and go down to school and get mad at the teacher because little Bobby got in trouble, and so it's the teacher's fault and the principal's fault and everybody else's fault, and they were mad at the judge and mad at the policeman. It's better to take care of that at home and show them there's consequences for our actions. Always, they're either positive or negative consequences, but there's always consequences. And that's what that verse is saying. When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise. I've told this story over and over again. I'm sure my mom and my brother love it when I tell it. But my mother has never slapped me across the face for one reason. I saw her do that to my older brother one time, and I made a note of it. Never earned one of those. Yeah, that's right, and that's how it should be. We should, and some people understand something. Not all kids respond to the same kind of discipline, and so some kids you could whip them till the belts wore out. It's not going to change anything. We have to understand that child. Have to read that child. For some, it's taking away some privilege or some toy or whatever it is. For others, it's an early bedtime. Old Brer Rabbit said, "Oh, please don't throw me in the briar patch." You send a kid to his room, it's like Disney World in there in some kids' rooms. Like, "Oh, please don't send me to my room." Some, it's go out and dig a hole or rake a field or, cut the grass or something like that. Yeah, right. It's good to be friendly, but you still got to be a parent. You're, that's right. You're not my friend. Yeah, you're right. I'm your parent. But they have to learn consequences, and the key in this verse is that when we see other people answer for their crimes or their trespasses or whatever you want to say, then we learn a lesson from that. We learn by seeing others punished. Um, so we have to make sure there's consequences. They don't have to be necessarily severe. It doesn't have to be a whipping. It could be whatever is applicable, whatever is effective with that child, but not just with that child, with that employee. How many of us ever worked in some place where there was a lousy employee that never had to do any work because everybody knew they were lazy and lousy, and people won't give them work, right? I see all the hands, right? Because they say, "Well, I'll get you to do it." Why? Well, because I know you'll do it right. Well, why don't you give it to him? Because he'll mess it up or won't get done. And so why do you keep them around, right? That's the question. There's no consequences, so guess what they do? They just stay on the paycheck, on the payroll. So we learn when there's consequences. Verse 13, whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. It's a good thing to be generous, and of course there's a limit, but it's a good thing to be generous and to consider how blessed we are. Aren't we blessed? We're so blessed. We're so blessed. And there are people in deep need that we could help with just a little bit. We could make a difference and help them. He was on a roll here. Look at verse 19. You think she just kept coming in there while he was trying to write? It is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and an angry woman. It's called hunting season. Yeah, that's why I'm in the woods, right? Yeah, you had too many wives. But even if he only had one, it's true, right? And again, it goes the same way. The people we live with should be the priority in our consideration. How I always think about somebody who said they were going to call a pastor, looking for a pastor, and they say, well, one of the ways that we look for a pastor is we try to go somewhere and see how his wife is. Is she happy? Because if she's not happy, that may be an indicator of other things. Now, obviously, if any of y'all knows a secret to how to make another person happy, tell me what it is. But in general, we, the people in our home, if we make that a sanctuary, if we make that a place of peace and of rest and of joy and of love, then that ought to be indicated outside the doors. But if someone is always, beat down, miserable, unhappy, then we question what's going on in there. And so, but that's, whether it's the husband or the wife, it's better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman. Verse 23, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. You know what I think? I think he must have read verse 19 when he was writing it. He must have said it out loud. And she heard. He said, well, I should have kept my mouth shut on that one. Let me write that down too. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. Verse 25, the desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. So, can you lay that out for me? Can you explain that to me? The desire of the slothful killeth. He dies in his desire because he always wants, but he never achieves because he won't work for it. That's what it's saying. So it kills him. It's eating him up because I want, but he can never get. His dream is always out there. You know why? Because he won't work. Verse 26, he coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not. So he's always in need, and then the righteous, what? The righteous have the ability to share. Why? Because they work. The Bible tells us that we should Paul said this, put your hands to work. Go to work. Not just so you can meet your need, but so you'll have enough to share. That's New Testament. So we should have enough to share. And the Bible also says that a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Again, it's not that we're trying to pile up money and hoard money, but we've got to be thinking about the future and not spending. Children, you give a kid $5, what's he want to do today? He wants to go spend it. He wants to go to Walmart or Dollar General we drive by Dollar Tree and Chloe. Can we go to Dollar Tree? I don't know we've ever been to Dollar Tree. We drive by Dollar General and, can we go to Dollar General today? No, we can't go to Dollar General. But if they've got $1 in their pocket, they want to burn through it. That's fine if it's a kid. We shouldn't be that way. We've got to think more clearly. We've got to look toward the future. Verse 31, the horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. So he's not telling us that we shouldn't prepare. He's not telling us that we shouldn't have an army, that we shouldn't have protection. How many of you have locks on your homes? Yeah. Why? Well, because you want to keep what's supposed to be out there out there. You want to protect yourself. Is it because you don't trust God? I trust God. I just don't trust people. so so having locks and having firearms and having an army, having that protection does not diminish that we trust in God. But we must, with all those preparations, remember that God is in control. With all of our preparation, we must keep our confidence in God and not in our weapons. Chapter 22, verse 1, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. So our reputation, we cannot let other people's opinions guide our lives. But we have to be honest if we ever hear somebody else's assessment of us. If they say that we are, greedy or selfish or mean or whatever they might have, lazy, whatever criticism they might have, we have to evaluate that when we hear it, say, is that really who I am? Yeah, right? So we keep those in mind, and we have to evaluate, is that honest? Is that true? Or is it just them being, critical? Our reputation is important. And we should live our lives in such a way that when people hear something bad about us, they won't believe it because they know who we are. So if they hear something that's sideways, they go, well, that can't be true because I know them. And that's how we should live our lives, to build that reputation, because our reputation is a reflection on God. Our reputation is a reflection on the church. Verse 2, the rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. One's not better than the other. Verse 3, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Pay attention. So we're watching patterns. We're watching patterns. We can watch patterns in the financial side. We can watch patterns in the weather side. We can watch patterns in people's behavior. I've seen people whose lives went straight down. And I've seen people whose lives got so much better. And there's a pivot point. And if we'll watch and pay attention to people, we can read those patterns, and we see those patterns in people. We know where the trouble is. And we can warn them. We can caution them. We can help them. And the prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself. Hey, don't go there. Don't do that. But the simple, they just have no regard, and they move along recklessly, and they're punished. Verse 4, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Humility and fear of the Lord. Verse 6, another well-known verse. Train up a child in the way he should go. And when he is, wrong page. When he is old, he shall not depart from it. He will not depart from it. So we train him up. And when he is old, he remembers that stuff. I've had conversations this week with people, and a lot of times we talk about their salvation and their baptism and their church experience. And I hear a lot, well, when I was a kid. Hey, they may stray, but we are laying a foundation. We are putting something in their hearts that's there. And they look back on that when they were a kid, and they remember that stuff, and it stays with them. And many times they return to it. A lot of people returning to God. Verse 7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. There's a change in relationship when we borrow money. Verse 9, he that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth his bread to the poor. A bountiful eye. So we're talking about mindset. We're talking about attitude. But when we have that mentality of favor and blessings and abundance, it changes how we treat other people. But when we're always poor-mouthing and thinking about how broke we are and how poor we are, then we don't help. Some of the most Generous people are people who do not have it to give, but they will suffer and they will do without in order to help other people. Why? Because they have a bountiful eye. Verse 10, cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. You see that? You know, it's not something that I like to talk about, but we've had people come through this church over the last, I don't have to go back 20 years to do this, but we've had people that come to this church and they were troublemakers. And they wanted to cause trouble. And one in particular, I said, why do you come to church here? You don't like it. Like there's other churches. You drive a long way to this church and you don't even like it. Well, my husband likes it. That was her answer. And then there's been others that I didn't ask, and I didn't ask them specifically to go away, but I sure prayed about it. You know, I prayed about one that would leave, and I never saw him again, never have seen him again. But he was a troublemaker. We don't need, God's house doesn't need that. God's church doesn't need that. There's so many churches. The reality is, if you don't like this one, you probably drove past 6 to get here. And you can find one of those other churches to be unhappy in. You don't have to be unhappy here. So everybody here is in this room is here voluntarily. Now the ones in the back, maybe not so much. Right? I made my kids come to church today. But we all came because we wanted to be here. And he says, if you take the scorner out, the contention goes out. Oh, the relief. Just makes it so much better. Strife and reproach shall cease. Verse 13, the slothful man saith, there's a lion without. I shall be slain in the streets. What does that mean? What's that? Proverbs 22. It means he's always coming up with some reason not to go to work. Excuse to be lazy. Yeah, imagining problems. Trying to think of what it was, but something this week. Somebody said, I need to talk to you. And it was the way they said it. I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh boy. But when I was able to talk to him, it was none of the stuff I had imagined. There was no problem. But it was the tone. And Brother Terry used to do that to me. He said, I need to see you Wednesday. Oh no. What do I do now? You know, he wasn't my boss, but he was my predecessor. And I looked up to him. And so, boy, I dread that. What did I say now? And I'd go, and it'd be nothing about anything. You know. But when we do that, we have an excuse, and we get this idea, oh, there's this danger out there. We imagine it. There's a lion out there. I might get struck down by a lion. Well, you know, always come up with some excuse. And I'm sure every one of us had a reason this morning that we could have stayed home. We could have thought, well, that storm, I know they say it's going to come after church, but it might come before church. Now I have to drive in the rain, and my tire, I don't know if my tires or my windshield wipers or, you know, we come up with all kind of excuses. My back hurts. Oh, my feet hurt. You know, oh, I got a little tinge of a pain. We could all have excuses. You know what that is? That's slothfulness. We could do the same thing tomorrow. We could do the same thing the next day. The lazy man, the slothful, says there's a lion out there. If I go out, I'll die. Verse 15, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. So not only did he have wives, he had what? He had children. And it's important to know it is our job I thank God for Sunday school teachers. I thank God for school teachers, especially the end of August. I love them. All right? But it's our job. I can't expect the school teacher to enforce behavior if I don't enforce it at home. You know, we have, and I, first of the year, I write letters on all those notes the teachers send home. I put a note at the bottom that says, call me if there's a problem. I don't want to hear about it later. I want to know about it now. And I will come to the school and deal with it now. And I tell the kids, I will deal with it at school in front of your friends. They understand that. And it says foolishness is bound in their heart. Yeah. So, yeah. We've got to train them. They've got to be trained. It's our job. God ordained the home first. That is the first institution of God was husband and wife, family. They had children, family. And then we have community and cities and counties and states and nations and all that kind of stuff. It starts at the home. That's where we've got to train them. That's where we establish authority and rules. And if we don't establish authority and we don't establish rules, they get out there and they go, what do you mean I got to do it that way? What do you mean I have to? They don't understand. The rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Verse 24, make no friendship with an angry man. With a furious man thou shalt not go. So again, that we got to look at people and read their character and know their reputation and be. It goes back to the scorner. You know, cast out the scorner and contention shall go out. Think about your life right now. Look in your circle. Is there somebody in that circle that's a troublemaker? And is it you? Right. We got to fix that. We could. Sometimes it's a relative, isn't it? Sometimes it's family. And it's not that we don't love them, but we've got to limit our exposure to them because they just upset us. They just upset everybody around them. And if you say, well, but I love them and I need to spend time with them, then you do it by yourself. Don't bring them into your family. Don't bring them around all your friends. You spend time and see if you can help them. But that scorner, that angriness, that anger is bad. Verse 28, remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. Of course, we're talking about actual landmarks. We're talking about actual boundaries on land, and establishing tribes and families and all that kind of stuff. And we're not supposed to move it over. Have any of you ever dealt with a land dispute? Somebody the other day was telling me about their property line. I said, well, that person thinks that's their property, but it's my property. You know, so far over there. And just because the fence is there doesn't mean that's where the property ends. So moving, shifting it. And so what will people do? They'll move things over. It's funny to me because growing up, our neighbor always mowed the grass about 2 foot over into our yard. And it was because he thought it was his yard. And then when my parents sold their house, they had the survey, and it ran right through his building that he had built there. And so, you know, we love them, and they're like family to us. But it just goes to show, you know, we got to have boundaries. We got to have lines, distinction. And so he's saying, don't remove the ancient landmarks. And we always use that verse to refer to spiritual matters, doctrinal matters. And we need to be careful when we start saying, well, we don't want to teach this anymore. We don't want to do this anymore. Be mindful. Be careful about those things because there's a reason they are there. Sometimes the reasons are wrong and they got to go, but let's just be mindful of that. Verse 29, seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. So we're diligent, so we're learning diligence, not being lazy, not being angry, not bringing people, not exposing ourselves to angry people, mean people, all that stuff. chapter 23, verse 1. When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, and put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. So we have to be mindful again of how we conduct ourselves when we're eating in public. How's that? Is that a good lesson? Verse 9. Speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. You just get tired of repeating yourself and trying to train somebody and trying to teach somebody and trying to help somebody and trying to correct somebody when they won't hear it. And so we just stop talking to them because they're not going to listen anyway. And it has aggravated me, and I haven't had this trouble in many years. But people would call and they want counsel and they want hours of your time for counsel, and then they go out and do what they want to do anyway. They don't listen to anything you say. And so I get tired of that. I said, no, I can't have an appointment with you. I don't have time today. Why? Because it's a waste of my time anyway. You're not going to do what I said. You're not going to do what's right. And so, it's unfortunate, but we have to know when to draw the line with foolish people. Verse 10, again, remove not the old landmark and enter not in the fields of the fatherless, the boundaries, the property lines. Verse 12, apply thine heart unto instruction and thine ears to the words of knowledge. Verse 13, withhold not correction from the child. For if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. And I know that people don't like that. I know when I was a kid, I didn't like that. You're next. But again, we know enough to know that we need to be controlled and not angry and not abusive. It's intentional and it serves a purpose. And if we don't do it, it's going to lead to other trouble down the road. So let the Bible teach us when it comes to that. Verse 14, thou shalt beat him with the rod, shalt deliver his soul from hell. My son, if thine heart be wise, my heart shall rejoice, even mine. Yea, my reins or my gut shall rejoice when thy lips speak right things. Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. So it's such a joy when our children turn out to be good people. But that's purpose, that's intentional. They're boundaries, they're guidelines. Verse 20, be not among wine bibbers and among riotous eaters of the flesh. Again, just gluttonous. The drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. So drunkenness, gluttony, and slothfulness. He's warning us against those things. Hearken to thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. Verse 24, the father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice. He that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. So he's focused on, in these 3 chapters, what? Family, the home. And he cautions about marrying the right person and bringing our children up right. That's what these 3 chapters have, to the great degree, been about. Guarding ourselves. Sometimes he's focused on our words, and sometimes he's focused on our actions. And here he's talking about our self-restraint. And that's what we need to learn in these. He goes on and he continues to talk about drunkenness and such as that. Did y'all have anything else you wanted to add to these chapters, verses we covered? It's very practical. Again, if we'd read one every day of the month, and if you have a question, reach out and get clarification so you can understand it. There may come a point where you say, well, I've read this so many times that You know, how can I learn anything else from it? But it's great truth. All right, let's take a break.